You mentioned diving with great white sharks. How did you stay calm seeing a shark? How did you not enter like fight or flight mode when you're, face to face with these?
So ayahuasca is the Mount Everest of psychedelics. It's the most intense psychedelic you'll find more or less on the planet. I did see a demon the first time, and I realized that it was...
Wow.
Welcome to the Minds Unleashed show with your host, Eric. Join him on the journey where we explore transformative ideas, confront challenges, and discover new perspectives. Together, let's elevate the mindset and transform your personal and business success. So whether you're seeking motivation, practical advice, or a fresh perspective, you've come to the right place. Join Eric on the Minds Unleashed show, and let's dive in together to empower your mind and unleash freedom.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Minds Unleashed show. I'm your host, Eric. As always, if you get value out of this podcast, please share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and leave us a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple. I truly appreciate it. All right, let's get into today's show. I'm so grateful to introduce you to today's guest, Sara Roccisano. Sara is an author, scuba diver, storyteller, and speaker. Welcome to the show, Sara.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here today. So I love to start with taking you back to when you were unemployed for 2 years. And I found that story to be interesting because recently I was laid off for 6 months. And it definitely was a period of a lot of ups and downs and very ebb and flow on a day-to-day basis. And so I'm curious, what did you do on a daily and weekly basis to maintain your mental health?
Oh man, we could talk for hours about this question because almost 2.5 years of living in an 800 square foot apartment in New York City, trying to find a job, can really take a toll on your mental health, for me, Emboldened Adventures, that I have my travel inspiration content site, actually was born as a result of this period of looking for work. And so a short answer to that question, to help boost your mental health is creativity. It's to find your passion and find your creative outlets. And for me, back in, when was it? I lost my job early 2015. I ended up landing the next job in middle of 2017. So we're talking that long of a time, really pushing that boulder up a hill, hoping you're going to get a job and then realizing it didn't happen. So you just keep trying again. But that creative outlet for me at the time was 2016 when I learned how to develop a website. And so that was turning what I love to do is traveling the world and scuba diving into some sort of content that I started putting out to inspire people to be emboldened.
What kind of creative outlets did you dabble into within Embolden, right? You talked about traveling. So did you get into writing content? Did you kind of start a newsletter? What avenues did you go down?
So writing and graphic work for sure. And then learning how to build a website and developing an LLC. So Emboldened Adventures is my LLC. It's a real business and it's trademarked. So for me, it was my little science experiment in business as well. And it actually helped in conversation for the interview when I did land that full-time job. It was something that hiring manager really thought was interesting, because I proved, something of just doing what was interesting to me and being a self-starter and having grit. So those were my creative outlets for writing. And one term right now, the trend that's going around right now is this term called raw dogging. Have you heard that when people talk about being on a plane?
I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, so why I bring that up is because I do that all the time on my long international flights. I do not watch movies. I don't watch anything but the flight map and looking out the window. And why I say that is because all my writing that I did about my travel adventures were on those plane rides. And I would be there on, the little table that comes down for your food. And I would sit there with journals and just write. And it was a way of my creative outlet. And then I turned it into my creative adventure. That is Emboldened Adventures. So the flight map, the journal, on the plane, no movies. And I'm laughing now at these people on TikTok going, oh, I just raw dogged for 10 hours. I'm I did it for 30. Okay, buddy. That was 10 years ago.
I think that's actually an underrated tip though, is because if you actually put away your screen and put on airplane mode, you didn't bring an iPad or a laptop, like it's actually a great time to force yourself to kind of sit in your thoughts, or, as you're flying, you kind of look out into the world and you realize how small you really are in the like greater picture. So I definitely feel the same way, in the sense of like, you definitely think about deeper or more meaningful things. I've done it all the time when I used to have to travel for work. And so it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I've almost started to like just kind of sit there and chill on some flights or sleep. But it's interesting how, time does go by when you kind of get lost into, certain tangents that you end up down.
And this is very important because, when you're in your thoughts, it's also a creative outlet for you, for your mental health. And we talked about, that 2.5 year of unemployment. If you were to even go back further, I've been in a career for about 20 years that I just walked away from about 1.5 to 2 years ago. And in that time, since I graduated college to even today, I've been journaling. And most of my journals are on my travel adventures while I'm on that plane or while I'm in some sort of like hut in the middle of the rainforest. I'm journaling. I'm writing down everything that had happened because it's so exciting. I just absolutely love the adventures that have ensued from seeing the world. But I also did that while I would take the subway back and forth when I used to live in Brooklyn, and I worked on Park Avenue in Midtown Manhattan for like 10 years. I worked in 299 Park Avenue right by Grand Central, and I had long nights and long train rides back and forth. And I've seen it all from a New Yorker's perspective on that subway ride. If you had 2 hours times 7 days a week, you see a lot. You see the whole world on that subway. And so a lot of kind of passing the time was journaling. And so I've captured about 30 journals worth of my entire 20-year existence there. And that's what I'm now kind of taking and leveling up in kind of this next chapter of my life that I've chose for me, is becoming an author. So all those journals, living through the financial crisis of 2008. I mean, I was an investment banker when Lehman Brothers collapsed. I could tell you exactly what was happening back then. It's all in my journals when I was riding that D train, to Coney Island in Brooklyn. So for me, I'm taking all that writing and turning it into and leveraging. Here's that financial term, leveraging that work. And that's the creative outlet to get me through some tough times, whether it was working, intense career or not having a career. It's raw dogging. I raw dogged the subway, I raw dogged the plane, and now I'm taking that content and putting it into some real awesome books.
Was there anything else that you kind of did or explored while you were like laid off? Like for me, obviously I got into like certain like sports or hobbies to kind of almost like distract myself mentally. So was like writing and journaling that outlet for you, where you kind of didn't think about the stress of bills and when am I going to get a job, or how's this interview going to go, or this email that I'm waiting on? What
really kind of came about when I was in periods of times of job instability and job, unemployment, was my spiritual explorations. And that led to the story that I'm now writing as part of my trilogy of books that are coming out. A lot of my kind of delving into spirituality really amped up when I didn't have a job. And I'm not talking religion. I'm talking like psychics and mediums and past life regression and traveling the world and going to these ancient megalithic sites such as Easter Island and Tiwanaku and Pumapuku and Machu Picchu and all these places you see on the show Ancient Aliens. It makes you really think about life, in a way that you don't see behind, the computer in your cubicle under fluorescent lights and answering to a boss and having performance reviews. Like that numbs your mind. And when you're out of that and you start to really like test the universe delivers, and you start to like go down these interesting spiritual paths, which led me to the story of going into the Amazon rainforest and doing ayahuasca before the world came crashing down in 2020.
Yeah, I'm going to table the ayahuasca thing because I don't know much about it and I've heard you say it before. I want to kind of shift back towards like the layoff kind of question, which is like right now you probably see a lot of similar turbulence in the job market, right? With layoffs, or somebody that's been laid off, you have a friend that's been laid off. So like, what advice would you have to that person that is laid off, or, maybe they're have anxiety about being laid off?
I've been there 3 times. And in a period of 7 years, I had, if you add up all the time I was out of work, it was half the time. So 3-ish years of 7 years, 3.5 maybe, I was unemployed. And I held down a very expensive apartment with a hefty mortgage in Midtown Manhattan by myself. So I know the stress. I know the uncertainty. I know what that world looks like. And I've lived through it many times. So advice, you got to believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to trust that something good is going to come your way, that something's going to unfold in your favor. A lot of the battle of trying to find a new job is the mindset. It's the spiritual work. It's the belief in self. It's the authenticity. Because when you start to realize what's authentic, again, the journaling that comes out. Your authenticity comes out in journaling. It's just you and the page. It's your voice. It's how you see the world. That's now unfiltered in whatever you were doing before. That was, if you could imagine me with a suit and like a Prada bag and heels, like what am I looking like now? I'm more authentic. I'm more radiant. I'm more shining now. I'm a more clear self these days than kind of fitting into a cog, right? Into a system. So authenticity is where I would say is to kind of reach within, because once that really kind of starts to shine, you're going to be a rock star in those interviews. You're going to come across as awesome and memorable. And that's important because you talk about the creative outlets. You start doing things that kind of shake up the day to day, that get you going, get you joyous, get you grateful, practicing gratitude. And when you start to be interesting for yourself, it shines on your resume and it shines in interviews. Hence what I said, the hiring manager, after a 2.5-year period of looking for work and constantly getting rejected, that person hired me because I told them I created Emboldened Adventures. And I had the grit and I was excited and I talked about my travels. And even on my resume, I'm like, I went into a cage to see great white sharks in, Australia. And I saw that and they said, in these interviews, tell me more about that. I'm like, yeah, totally cool, right? I don't want to talk about the deals that I did or, the amount of capital I raised. Let's talk about the fact that I went halfway around the world and saw sharks, like that gets you engaged. And so, yeah, that's the trust in when you're in this unemployment period, that you get to come back to self. You get to find what makes you happy. You get to reinvent. And it's a complete, kind of blank canvas to kind of do something new for reinvention. So trust in yourself.
Now I'm curious, I find that you talked about, trusting yourself, but I feel like that there's almost like a crisis internally that happens before you get to that stage, right? Because your job almost becomes like your worth, right? So when you kind of just rip that right out of you, and the way that companies do it is not the most humane. What would you say to somebody that's struggling with that capability to be authentic with themselves and to have that mindset?
Yeah, it doesn't just happen because I told you so. It doesn't have a finger. Right. Obviously, there's some steps in between, and those steps are dictated by what you feel called to do. I don't have the playbook. You have the playbook. You're your own person. But yeah, I get what you mean, because when I see on LinkedIn all the time still, and it's just like, I'm so bored by LinkedIn, it's still a veneer of phoniness, corporate phoniness, I see anyway, and I don't like it. So it's that, I think the first step is identifying it and starting to see it, right? If you're mindless to it and you just kind of are operating with your eyes closed in this world that's not fitting, if you start to wake up, that's the awakening, right? You got to get kind of shook, right? And that's anything in life that kind of transforms you. You got to have the wake up call. And sometimes a job loss is a wake up call, and it's a blessing in disguise. Trust me when I say this. Been there many times. Blessing in disguise. Thank God I'm not in those positions anymore. Thank God I'm not answering to that boss anymore. Thank God, good riddance in some ways. But at the time, it doesn't feel like it. And so it's the hero's journey, as you probably know, right? Joseph Campbell, the awakening, the shakeup. And now you got to go through this journey of yours of adventure and, setback and whatnot. And it's that circle once you come back to self. And so that's how you get to the finish line of like trying to be authentic, but it's going to be hard. But you also have to have like, number one matters, and it's a sense of self and it's a love. And it's hard to kind of get there, but you got to keep trying and you got to keep pushing. You got to keep understanding, what makes you smile today? What's that gratitude that you're practicing? And what gets me, out the door and try something new? It's all about exploration.
Yeah, I think self-awareness is the key there. I'm curious, like, what do you think is like that next month, quarter, year look like for somebody that is in that position of being stuck, or they just got laid off last week, right? And they're still like going through the emotion processing, and they're living on LinkedIn. Like, I've been there, right? I was awake at 3-4 in the morning, right? With so much stress and anxiety. Like, I've never felt that before, right? And so much worth was tied into my job. And I realized that. And, now talking to like all my friends, right? I, picked up the hobby of pickleball, right? But I joked that during that time, like pickleball, like saved me in the way of like, it mentally pulled me. I wasn't focused on the job, LinkedIn and email. So back to my question of like, what do you say to that person that's a week into being unemployed, or laid off, and they're, asking you for advice on like, what does the next year look like for me to get to, where they see yourself at?
Okay, two things. First of all, I'm going to plug a speech that I did recently that goes into all of that. My alma mater is Cornell University. I was an engineer there undergrad. And as I'm reinventing, as we spoke about, one of the things I decided to take a chance on was public speaking. And in doing so, just, the past, call it 9+ months or so now, Cornell found me out of the blue. I still don't know how it happened. Goosebumps, maybe it's spirit somehow. But Cornell found me and they were like, hey, we would love for you to do a presentation on how to navigate layoffs. So I would say go to emboldenadventures.com, go on YouTube and go look up my speaking playlist, and you'll see I linked the video that goes into the details that go into like your mindset. Like, it's a good 45-minute presentation that I gave with slides. So, if you're real curious about the details, I would say consult that video and kind of get a sense. But the second thing I want to say to that question in a nutshell, right, because there's a lot to go into that, is put your expectations to the side. Because I just heard you ask me, what's 1 week look like? What's a month look like? What's a year look like? You're expecting something to happen, like, oh, it's going to take me a year, oh, it's going to take me a month, or oh, it's going to take me a day. Who knows what's going to happen? Remember, just let things unfold. No expectations. And what I'll say is, you may think it's going to take this much time to find a job. It may take double that time to find that job. So again, no expectations. Okay, that's the first kind of big piece I want to keep in mind, because that's only going to set you up for failure. I expect it to be this way. It's going to be worse, it's going to be better. I'm expecting it. And okay, guess what? It's not happening the way you're expecting. So now you're going to get upset. You're going to get down. And now, again, that's the domino effect of carrying into the energy of an interview or even applying to a job, right? You got to keep at it with upbeat resilience, happiness, radiance, like your authentic self. And that comes from just doing things that make you happy and what you're grateful for. So I go into the details about like, what does day 0 look like? What does day 1 look like? And a lot of it really has to do with your spiritual hygiene and your mindset growth, because everything else won't matter if you don't have those things under control. So I would say, yeah, week 1 is to kind of evaluate what you need to do, kind of figure out a game plan, figure out your mindset, practices, get out in nature, go walk at the river, go to the ocean where you are, go see nature, go look at the birds, figure out a way to like debrief all that crap that you had built up from that old job, because you're going to have that stuck energy. You're going to have those perspectives. You're going to be pissed off maybe the way things went down. You might want to punch a wall. I know I did. So obviously that energy is going to come to an interview. It's not going to work for you. So you got to figure it out and got to get yourself level set. Take a break even. Maybe if you have the opportunity, the means, give yourself a week off. Go travel. Like, give yourself the gift of freedom. right? You don't have to get up go to the office. You don't have to do the grind this week. Thank God. Go on a trip. Go drive out to like North Dakota and see some buffalo. Like do something different and get your mind clear and get yourself ready. And then you're like, let's fucking go. That's what you'll need to do. And that's how you're going to crush it. I hate using those terms, but that's the truth, right? Like you're in your driver's seat and you're in control here, and you're going to have to surrender as well. So it's a bit of a balance. Things are going to work out in ways you don't anticipate when you do get that next job. That's one thing I can guarantee.
I think a lot of people probably struggle with the acceptance and the surrender piece of that. And then that just like looming, nagging, like, thoughts from all your friends and family of like, oh, why are you traveling? Shouldn't you be looking for a job? Sometimes it's nice to just kind of, put something away and go explore, go, get your mind off of the thing that's like nagging you. And obviously, if you can't afford to travel or your severance wasn't as good or you didn't have an emergency fund or things like that, then there's a lot more day-to-day things you could easily go do.
I agree with you and I disagree with you at the same time. So one thing I heard there that I'm really like a stickler about, and whether or not again, it's almost ironic that I'm saying this because I'm arguing against it. I'm saying don't listen to the naysayers and don't listen to the external world. Here I am, the external world, telling you not to listen to the external world. You're an adult. We're all adults. We're in charge of our life. It doesn't matter what the external world is saying. It doesn't matter their opinion. It doesn't matter how they're reflecting on your situation. This is your situation. You're in charge of handling it. If you want to go drive, you can go drive. Who cares what they say, right? Who cares? Not your problem. It's my problem. And this is how I'm going to handle it. So that's the New Yorker in me, going like, who cares? Why is your opinion more valid than mine? I'm the one with this situation, and this is how I'm going to work it through. Thank you for the peanut gallery for your opinions, but they don't matter. And that's the mindset work that I'm talking about, the spiritual work I'm talking about, because that's the internal compass that's going to lead you forward, that beacon of light that, that still soft voice, who you are, and how you're going to handle this. And that the world is going to deliver something in a way that's going to work for you.
You've talked about the mindset growth and your personal development work. So can you kind of, start by taking us all back through your own like kind of healing journey and kind of walk us through how it started and talk us into, going to the Amazon rainforest?
It's been going on for a long time. Like I said, I've been in a career for about 20 years with fits and starts with layoffs. And, I walked away from that, cold turkey in my apartment in the kitchen in January 2022. So I basically surrendered at that point. So I'm done. But in that time, in those 20 years, I've been kind of exploring a lot of the spirituality. I don't even know where to start with that because it's just curiosity. Like, I don't even know like what really, piqued that curiosity. It was always like an interest of, like I mentioned earlier, going to these megalithic places and wondering really how did they build, this particular rock structure that's so perfectly cut, and these people are talking about aliens. Okay, why are they so open about UFOs that they just saw 2 weeks ago in Cusco, Peru? Literally the tour guide's talking about it. And yet when we were back in America, they're like, oh, don't say stuff like that. So it's stuff like that. Like when you start to get out to the world, you start to talk to real people on the ground, day to day, and you hear their perspectives and you hear their kind of look at the world, whether it's their religion, their temples, their spiritual kind of homages, a lot of indigenous wisdoms, whether it's like the mountain spirit, for instance, or the spirit of the plants, it starts to like make you think like, maybe the world is a bigger place than I really understand it to be, beyond kind of what I've been conditioned to think. Again, it's conditioned to think in business and how your career is and how to live your life in a very narrow way. Or it's conditioned to think about spirituality. Well, religion says this. Oh, well, I see it this way, and I'm learning it that way, and I'm challenging it this way. So everything's on the table, in my opinion, especially when you're in the throes of like, sadness and difficulty and challenge. So you start to seek a higher power maybe, or a power within maybe, and you start to really kind of think about everything. And so for me, like I started just going to these like, past life regression sessions in New York City and, the teacher of the Long Island medium, Teresa Caputo, she has her teacher, Pat Longo, in Hicksville, Long Island. So I used to go work with her just on a whim. I saw her on TV one day. I was like, let me email her and see if she'd want to talk to me. And that opened some interesting doors in terms of like seeing visions in my third eye. And it's funny because I was friends with a lot of psytrance people in New York City. And I mentioned this. I said, I saw these visions. This woman, kind of just did some energy work. And I started seeing these visions. And they started laughing at me. They're like, oh, she doused you with LSD. And I'm like laughing, like, oh my God, did she? And so then I went back to her and I said, hey, my friends are saying that you gave me LSD. And she's like, I'm a 75-year-old grandmother in Long Island. I don't have access to this stuff. No, that's not true. So it's things like that when you're starting to like, oh my God, I see some interesting things. I'm starting to feel things. I'm starting to sense things. I'm curious about things, and you go with it. And over time, through travel, through exploration, through hardship, the universe came calling to me in late 2019. This is how I started off my first book that's going to be released in next year, 2025. I dared the universe and I said, I will go do ayahuasca in the Amazon rainforest for 7 ceremonies with the indigenous Shipibo shamans. My friend Michelle had asked me, we were going to some, nightclub, rave in Brooklyn in Halloween of 2019. She's like, hey, I want to do this. And I never touched really any drugs for that matter. I never touched anything. I just drank and, smoked a little weed. I never touched anything. So I was like, okay, what's that? And I said, well, if I get laid off, which we kind of knew there were some, rumblings that layoffs were going to come about. I said, I'll come with you. And then within a week, I got laid off unexpectedly. I was last on the list. And then I had to follow through. So early 2020, I was on a plane in the middle of the rainforest, completely removed from everything, starting the psychedelic, kind of amazing, like, holy crap, I see the world in a completely different way now. And it totally, totally reset everything I thought I knew. And here I am now coming back to a world in New York City that starts shutting down because of coronavirus, which I had no idea what was going on. So I'm essentially like Jared Leto. Jared Leto was at a silent meditation retreat for 2 weeks. And then when he came out of it, he's like, what happened? What's coronavirus? What's going on? Well, I was gone for 5 weeks. Part of it was in Morocco. Part of it was in the rainforest. Part of it was in Bolivia to see some of these sites that are featured on Ancient Aliens, Tiwanaku, Pumapuku, the Nazca Lines, near Lake Titicaca, stuff like that. And I came back completely removed from New York, and I land and I'm like, why are people wearing masks? Why is everyone, disinfecting their groceries with bleach? Why is everyone freaking out? So like, that was a very different kind of world that I came back to, all knowing that like I completely changed the way I like understand and sense the world. So it's changed me in a way that it helped embolden me to walk away from this career that I talked about. And, now I'm on to reinventing. I have a trilogy coming out that talks about these years. I mean, because in 2020, I ended up finding a job during that time, but then I left it. But in that time, I also started doing this kind of spiritual discovery, I amped it up. I was working with wisdom keepers around, in Guatemala, medicine women, wisdom keepers in North Dakota on the reservation, you name it. I was doing some really interesting things and working more with these plant medicines as well. And it really kind of like opened my eyes in such an amazing way. And now, as you know, as we were talking before, I'm in the process of closing that chapter, selling my apartment, getting out of New York, really becoming my authentic self that you see today.
So I have to ask, like, what is ayahuasca? And can you kind of talk us through what those 5 weeks looked like? Can you kind of give us all the details on that?
Ayahuasca is the Mount Everest of psychedelics. It's the most intense psychedelic you'll find more or less on the planet. It is a psychedelic that's created by 2 plants. It's a vine and it's a chacruna leaf. So they find these plants in the rainforest in the Amazon. The vine grows in one part of the rainforest. The chacruna leaf grows in another. And these indigenous wisdom keepers for many centuries have been working with this medicine, plant medicine. And what it does is it really opens up, the way you can, quote, see the dimensions. It's a healing medicine. It heals traumas that are stored within you. It's 20 years of therapy, they say, in one drink of the brew. It's a tea. They brew it. But what also is critical to the medicine's effects are the shamans, the way that they hold the ceremony, the safe space that they create energetically for you, a vessel, and they sing these ikaros, which are the songs of the plants. And when they train as shamans at young ages, they're in isolation in the rainforest, and they start to hear, again, this back to spirituality, right? They start to hear the vibrations of the plants, and they start to sense, the goings on of the herds of animals and whatnot. And they start to really be part of the set and setting that is the wisdom of the Amazon rainforest. And those songs of the plants are vibrational kind of energies, if you will, and they translate it into their Shipibo tongue, as well as some Quechua and Spanish. And the singing, the vibrational singing, they see it psychically in you while you're there, and they're working with you. And they're able to extract energies. Your chakras are being aligned. They're sending you on these psychedelic adventures into these multiverses. The medicine will show you what you need to see. Sometimes it's very scary. Sometimes it's a mirror to yourself of things you need to face and let go. But every time they say, if you take it 100 times, every single experience is different. So it's hard to say that my experience will be exactly like maybe potentially yours if you do it. But set and setting are very critical. The rainforest is very critical. It's very much a component of, doing this instead of going to Brooklyn and doing it in some warehouse rave. No, I would be terrified to get on a subway after that. No, go to the rainforest or try to find a place that's protecting you as a vessel, protective vessel. So that's what I did. I did 7 ceremonies. One's intense. I did 7 over 2 weeks, and no access to anything about the world, no emails, no nothing. And there was 25 of us from around the world with the shamans, the 5 shamans. And we did it, and it was intense, I have to say, but it was so beautiful, and hence why I'm writing my book about it. So that was 2 weeks, but I think you asked me about 5 weeks. So I don't know if you have any questions about that in particular, but I can go into the 5 weeks at some point.
I guess the question that's burning in my mind is as somebody that's likes to know what's going on or a little anxious, were you ever scared for your safety being there? How did you trust these people?
So that's the whole part about surrendering and knowing who you are and knowing how to trust yourself, right? We talked about that earlier, and that kind of period of time when you're unemployed and you start to really kind of work on your inner self, right? Your mindset. And really that a component of that is knowing how to trust yourself and knowing how to read the vibes of what doesn't feel right and what feels right. As a New Yorker, I will tell you, living in the city for so long, what street not to walk down because you get a bad vibe about that. Like I said, I've been on the subway for a long time. I know, okay, don't go in that car. That guy's a little, I don't know. I don't feel safe, right? I'm not feeling a good vibe here. Or I just walk in the subway and people around me don't live in New York. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so scared. It's why? I don't feel scared. It feels good to me. The vibe's good. And it doesn't matter what you see. It's what you feel. That's what I'm getting at. So, it will require some work to get there in terms of how do I feel comfortable surrendering? How do I feel comfortable surrendering? How do I feel comfortable trusting? And so for me, I didn't just quickly decide, oh, I'm going to do ayahuasca now. I did some research, and my book goes into that. The first few chapters talk about how I really evaluated this. I really went into the weeds about okay, I watched a bunch of testimonials. I, watched 2 documentaries. I, asked some questions to the facilitators ahead of time. I sensed it. Is this something I really want to do? And do you feel called to do it? That's also the question. Does this feel called? Are you feeling called for this? Because if the answer is no, I just want to do it, just for fun, then don't do it. Do not do it. Because once you open that can of worms, you can't put them back. But I will say though, that when you get there, what we did is we picked my friend Michelle picked a very good, temple. We picked a very good place that's well known. Dr. Gabor Mate, who's well known on the internet. He's a medical doctor who talks about, traumas in young children and how that really, kind of creates addictions in people's lives. He's a well-known doctor on the internet, well-known guy. I like him a lot. He is one of the board members of this particular temple that I went to. So it's one of the better ones, if not the best one you'll find around the world. So it's going to be, they're going to do it right. Not, some random shaman you find like in some market in Peru that you have no idea about. Like, yeah, don't do that either. Do your research, right? Feel it out, what feels comfortable. It's just like that analogy. Like, don't walk down that street. That doesn't feel good. This one feels okay. I'm feeling good. But that's what the medicine's going to do once you're there. I mean, the hard part, and I talk about this, is they pour you the tea and they look at you, the shamans, and they're like, all right, here's your chance, drink it. And that's like the equivalent of bungee jumping. You're like, great. What do I do? do I drink it or not? Like, what am I going to do? So that's kind of what you work on too, is growing that, pair of cojones to say, is this what I want? Am I ready? Can I surrender? Because the medicine's going to ask you to surrender. And that's what I'm talking about. So you're seeing this person today who's been through a lot of these situations, not just ayahuasca, but a lot of situations are asking me to surrender, asking me to trust, asking me to be strong, asking me to be brave, asking me to get through something that's going to be what feels impossible. Again, the mindset, right? And expectations. And sometimes the hardest things are the best blessings. So yeah, you can do it if you want. There's a will, there's a way.
I'm curious, you said you drink this tea and sometimes you can have a bad experience, right? It sounds like you did. So when you were going through this bad experience, we'll say, like, how did you maintain going forward instead of being like, okay, I'm like scared, I want to stop, or I want to go home?
Some people did go home. 2 people cut out early. It can happen.
That sounds like me. I would be scared.
You don't know. You may not. You don't know until you're there. So you're already like, don't put some expectations on that. 2 people did go, but no one forced them. It's 100% on you. Do you want to leave or not? It's up to you. Everything's on you. No one holds your hand. No one says you have to be here. You paid the money. Like, you have to follow through. It's all on you. So this is what my book goes into. So bad experience is all relative, right? Again, back to expectations. I was expecting to see a demon because that's what I heard on the internet. You're going to see a demon. There's going to be a demon. It's going to be scary. You're going to see something that's going to really scare the crap out of you. You're going to see it. It's going to be a bad trip. Oh my God, be careful. And I was like, okay, I'm going to see the demon. Freak, I'm scared, like there's a demon coming. But there was also another video where the guy saw the demon the second time. The first time he was scared out of his wits. Second time he saw it and he laughed at it. He laughed at the demon. And that in itself took the power away from the demon, or whatever this bad entity was that scared the crap out of him the first time. He laughed at it. And when he laughed at it, the thing, again, this is all what you see in your mind. Like, it could be your mind working, it could be spirit, it could be whatever you feel like seems right to you as you explore this. But the demon laughed back at him and said, okay, I'm not scary, I get it. So he took away the power of this fear that he was seeing in front of him. So that actually happened to me twice. I did see a demon the first time, and I laughed. Well, the first time I saw it, and I realized that it was me. I was the demon. And I go into this ceremony too, and I realized that it was my own ego. It was my own sort of like stubbornness. It was my own arrogance that I brought into the Maloka, which is the ceremonial space, coming from years of working on Wall Street and private equity and everything else in New York. I was arrogant. I was the shit, right? And that morphed into a demon. And I looked at it and I realized that's me. I'm the bad guy. I'm the jerk, or I'm the, scary one, because it's my ego. It's this that's just not sitting right in a balance. So that was ceremony 2. That actually didn't scare me. I was more actually, it grew my ego more. I was like, oh, I'm tough, freak this. I can handle anything. And then I saw the demon again and I laughed at it and it laughed back. Same thing. The same guy that, told me on the internet, on YouTube. The 7th ceremony, however, 7, that's where I was like, oh my God, this is so terrifying. This is so terrifying. The last ceremony was where I got terrified. And it happened when everything was over and the shamans left for the night. I felt like I was going to go into a mental institution. And I basically was like freaking out. I couldn't see. I was like blind. I was panicked. I was shaking. I relived 9/11 in my head. I saw the towers collapse. I was like, so much was going on. I was like, and I thought when I couldn't get on a plane. And by the time I got on the plane, they were going to put me in Bellevue Mental Hospital in New York City. And I thought the CIA was hiding in the bushes. So I was like, they're going to throw me in prison. They're going to throw me in a mental institution. The towers are collapsing. I was like freaking out and I can't see. Where is everybody? I was freaking out. That was scary. And you know what happened? I got through it. This is part of like my book. Compassion got me through it. Love and compassion. And what was that? It was one of the volunteers from the Amazon village nearby who stays overnight. He hugged me. His name was Dennis. He was a door angel. They call him the door angels. Dennis hugged me and he let me cry on his shoulder for 5 minutes straight. This man never met me before. Beautiful energy. He hugged me. And then Michelle also was still in the Maloka. She was waking up from her ceremony and she rushed over to me and she grabbed me. And she said, lay down on my lap. Let me stroke your hair. Shh, it's going to be okay. So those two people showing me compassion in my most vulnerable, scariest of moments in my entire life, it seemed at the moment, made me feel better and it helped me grow. And it showed me the power of love and how it trumps everything. It trumps fear. And that's why you walk away from this going, nothing scares me, dude. Like, that's nothing. It's love. It's coming together. It's gratitude. It's beauty. It's exactly what I was saying before about mindset. It's, okay, fine, you lost your job. Okay, you got to get through it. How are you going to get through it? You're going to find a way to make yourself happy. Gratitude, joy, get you excited in the morning, saying forget you to the neighbors looking through you, through the window and making judgments on you. I'm going to go to North Dakota. Have fun with that and make me happy. That's what matters. And then fear, goes to the wayside and you realize how powerful you really are, how strong you are and how you can get through anything and how you can reinvent anytime you want.
Wow. That was a lot. And I really loved how you said how like love and compassion, because it almost sounds like it's like two things in like the fighting ring, right? You have like your ego on one side and like your, love and, self-compassion on the other, just like duking it out. And it's interesting because I've kind of like gone through these own mental gymnastics in my head around like learning about ego and then learning about like love and compassion. And, it's something I was told, where it's like, I have a lot of like negative self-talk, right? And then I was told like, well, be more loving and compassionate towards yourself. And I'm like, I don't even know how, like, what does that look like? And you have to like slowly start to like unravel all these like deeply rooted issues that exist, and facing your fears, right? For you were, pretty much, couldn't see is scary enough, let alone going through all these different traumatizing experiences all at the same time is, a lot to kind of manage and deal with. And it's, I was very intrigued to hear how like love and compassion was the word you chose to use that got you through that. What happened like after that seventh ceremony? What happened when you could start to like see again? Were you just like kind of shook in the moment and kind of just processing everything? Like, when did you have the self-reflection to realize that the love and compassion is what was able to kind of get you to the other side?
I journaled everything about this experience, which is why I could write a book about this. And if you go on Emboldened Adventures, the YouTube channel, you'll see the 10 videos I did when I was at the rainforest. So I like turned on the camera and I would talk to the camera and be like, this is what happened last night. Okay, gotta go off to the next ceremony. So I had it documented. And even took photos, because that's what I do as a travel content inspirer. Like I take photographs of everything. And so, all that is kind of like a reflection. And I'm still reflecting now, 4 years later on this, as I wrote the book and kind of go into reminding myself through looking at the pictures and rereading my journals and all. But the moment I woke up that next morning, I was so tired and I was still really sad and just kind of drained. And I go into the book about this, a lot of it, there were 4 other instances that half morning into lunchtime that continued to show compassion. It was that person I mentioned earlier about how I did my research and I talked to some of the facilitators on Zoom before I left to go to the rainforest and make that decision of actually going and putting down my down payment. One of those people actually showed up. Because it was the last day, or the second, maybe it was the last day, I believe, the last full day. He showed up for the first time. His name is Publio, and I was so happy to see him. I cried when I hugged him. I was like, "Oh my God, Publio! I'm so upset. I had a bad trip." And he was the one that first told me about surrender and trust. And he reminded me again, surrender and trust, and go to nature and just be still with a reflection of what just happened. He was very awesome. Again, back to energy. His energy felt awesome. I just felt comfortable and I trusted him. And I was just like, okay. And then I talked to one of the maestras, the shamans, Olga, who was one of my favorite of the bunch. And she was there the next morning. And I saw her big smile and oh God, I hugged her and she made me feel better. And then my friend Becky spent time just sitting and listening, because a lot of us all were going through our own stuff. So a lot of the integration was happening during, and we would be in group sessions and we would talk about things and just kind of share and go off one-on-one and talk with people. So Becky was an awesome, shout out to Becky in the UK. She was just listening to me, just sitting there very quiet, holding her knees, just like listening and rocking with me. That felt awesome. And then I went up to the village where Dennis was from. And I actually went on my own walk by myself up to the village, and I just sat with the energy. I sat with the chickens and the little puppy that came and the little kittens. And then there was this cute little toddler about 2 years old who was chasing after the puppy, and just me sitting there in the sunshine, just having this literal mind blowing experience just a few hours prior in the evening really helped me feel better. And then they talk about integration. It's integrative. You have to integrate these wisdoms, and then just add to the fact, yada, yada, yada. 3 weeks later, I'm back in New York City when things are shutting down. It's what is going on? It's its own story. But yeah, it's this trust, right? Trust in the unknown. You don't know, you don't expect, you don't know what's going to happen next. Just be okay in knowing that you're going to be fine no matter what.
Let's say there's somebody out there that maybe going to an ayahuasca shaman ceremony doesn't sound up their alley. Did you try other more traditional avenues for personal development and growth? Was there any books or podcasts that stood out to you, or any therapy that you tried that maybe you would recommend somebody starting there as a, first couple steps?
Don't go 0 to 100, unless you feel called. Again, if it feels like it's a calling, then explore it. But don't, maybe not 0 to 100 is the right way. It's ongoing. This is ongoing. It's even ongoing now. And so specific recommendations I have: scuba diving. We talked, I'm a scuba diver. A way that got me really balanced in some ways, from a really intense career that I had in New York City that was very unbalanced, was scuba diving and traveling. That's hence why I love to travel. It got me away from it. And scuba diving, as you know, in Florida, the beach and the ocean has such beautiful elixir. It's such a beautiful elixir in terms of electromagnetic properties of the minerals in the water and the neutral buoyancy of scuba diving. And you almost feel like you're in this Zen meditative state when you're diving, and the world around you is gone. All it is you and that flounder or whatever you're seeing, the parrotfish, and that in itself is a beauty. It's again, connecting to nature and listening and finding your inner core. So that to me was very, beautiful. It's medicine. It's nature medicine in some ways. So less about, actual prescription medicine. It's real medicine, the sun and the water, I did go to some therapists, but none of them were good. I fired all 3 of them. So forget you. You didn't help me. And you didn't give me pills. I never took any pills either. But really what helped me were, especially in that time of 2.5 years of unemployment, when I say it was 2015 to 2017, I was listening a lot to Gary Vaynerchuk. He was kind of on the up and up. Ask Gary V was one of his early podcasts, and I listened to his thing every day. Ask Gary V. The Ask Gary V show. And so I'd listen to Gary. I listened to James Altucher back then. now I like David Goggins. I like Wim Hof. I do Wim Hof methods, like the cold showers and the breathing. That always is very useful and very helpful for the heart and soul. Mel Robbins is great. She has some coaching programs, which are great, which I've taken part of. There's so many great voices, and we're in an era of authenticity these days because, these sort of voices have their own platforms and they're real. Like, we don't see it on broadcast television, thank God, right? It's where we could seek it out on, the real authentic means. So I'm just so happy that like TikTok exists and like, these sort of forums exist because we can get the true filter. We don't get any filter. We get the true people and them being them true. Like me, I'm being my true self, right? There's no sort of producer in my ear saying, don't say that, conform to this, only answer this question this way. Corporations are like that too, right? You're not a good worker. You're getting a hit on your performance review. You didn't do enough. You got to do more, conform, comply. And so that's what psychedelics teach you too. It's like, no, I'm not conforming or complying. No, stop telling me what to do. And so that's where the authenticity happens. And it's not just one voice. It's a collection that you yourself magnetize and attract and seek what feels right for you. The people I just mentioned may not be right for, none of them may be right for you. But it's just a sense, again, it's that feeling it out, right? It's this sensing. It's this, okay, I can definitely go down this street in New York because this feels good. It may look scary to you, but it feels fine to me. I know this place. I feel good. I'm going to go down the street. I'm not scared of these people. They're not scary. They're my fellow New Yorkers. Like, I'm one of them, So, but there might be that street where that guy looks perfectly fine, but he's the one who's going to hurt you. So it's a sense. It's your sense, your spidey sense that helps guide you in what feels right.
What I love too is that you mentioned constantly feeling seems to be like the primary kind of driver that you've used to kind of be your compass. And so Gary Brecka comes to mind for like the Wim Hof breathing, the cold shower, grounding. And I think I like what resonates most about his message is he's like, you can do all of these things. They are free. They are accessible to pretty much everybody. Right. And it's really just about trying them out, right? Try it out once, 1, 2, 3 times, see if it works. If you don't like it, don't do it. If you do like it, keep doing it. And so I think that's a great way to like just get somebody kind of started and on the ball. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars. You don't have to do all these crazy fancy, things. I think just getting that ball rolling is, the hardest part sometimes. That's something that I have definitely seen. I've tried cold showers. I can't do a cold shower. I'm too much of a wuss. Grounding is something that, you're like, put your feet on the earth, right? And you don't realize like why it matters. And then you try and you're like, okay, I kind of like this. Even if I'm traveling, I can still do these things. Even if I'm not in my home, I can still do these things. And so I think that's the more important message to truly take away from that as well.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I do my spirit walks every morning here in Connecticut now. First thing in the morning, I'll go. Sometimes I have my I'll show it to you. I have a Native American drum that I picked up, and I take it with me sometimes. And I don't know if people think I'm funny looking or what, but I'll go drum. Here it is right here. I found this in a beautiful shop in Connecticut. It's Pacific Northwest. But I take that. I do my spirit walk. I do my gratitudes in the morning. And the nature speaks to me. Like, for instance, literally yesterday, I was walking, drumming, had my head down, and I looked up and there was a black bear, a huge adult-sized black bear, 15 feet in front of me that came out of the woods. And I was like, oh, and I had a drum in my hand. And I was like, the only thing I could do to scare it is to hit the drum, but I'm not going to do that. And I watched this beautiful creature just come out of the woods, look at me, and then it just kept walking across the street. And then I followed it a little bit, and I went down someone's driveway, and it kind of turned and looked. I got goosebumps. I see that, to me, it felt very spiritual. It was like a spiritual, just like time stood still and spirit was talking to me. And I thought about it today because I was talking to someone who's part of one of my creative projects I'm on. And I said, I've been and we were talking about this before we recorded, that I've kind of been in a hibernation hermit mode. And I feel the energies starting to shift today, where I'm like I said, my first podcast in a while, I've been kind of in this cave a little bit. and I feel the ice starting to melt. And then I thought about it, I was like, oh, hibernation, the bear. Like that is a symbol in some ways. Like it's working for me. Like the bear showed me time to come out of hibernation. So that's part of my spirit walk, my gratitude walk, and that's 100% free. And that's such a cool experience, you know? Like I saw a bear. Like how cool is that? And I'm laughing, I'm giggling. And guess what? If I went for a job interview, well, how you doing today? I saw a bear yesterday. Really? And that breaks the ice. Back to the ice again.
Right. It makes the conversation more human and less like so focused on, your performance review or what new KPI did you implement or what new program did you deploy. So you mentioned diving with great white sharks. How did you stay calm seeing a shark or a stingray or a turtle, whatever that could cause fear in a normal human person? How did you not enter like fight or flight mode when you're, face to face with these?
Okay. Normal is a qualifier and an expectation. So nothing's normal, in my opinion, in my world. Nothing is normal. And so for me, like a shark, it's relative, right? You build up to something like this. And so when you see your first shark, it probably is terrifying, maybe. And, it's probably a little reef shark or a little nurse shark that doesn't do anything. It's more afraid of you. But you're terrified snorkeling. Oh my God, I saw a shark. I saw a shark. I'm so scared. Or a barracuda. Oh my God, it's so scary. But then you see it like 4 more times. You're like, that's so cool. I saw a shark. I saw a shark. Do you see this shark? Again, it's back to my New York analogy, right? Like, I'm not afraid of New York, but that first time visitor might be afraid. It's that, well, you get used to it and they're like, okay, it's not so scary. So you build it up. It's all relative, just like anything. In terms of the shark cage, that's the only time I did it was in Australia with the great whites. I would recommend trying not to swim with a great white. They're pretty large, especially when you stand on the boat and you're like, this thing is like half the size of the boat. Like you see it from down in the water. You're like, that thing's huge and has big teeth. I did see tiger sharks underwater and hammerheads, schools of hammerheads when I was on Cocos Island, and that was without cage. And so one thing I will say is, as you continue to dive and kind of see the world, the sharks are afraid of you. The sharks are scared of you. They're afraid of your bubbles. They're afraid of you because you have a tank on your back and you're kicking, right? You have fins. You're as long, if not longer than they are sometimes. They don't want to get near you. They may attack you on the surface because they think you're like, I don't know, a bird or something that they think is tasty like a turtle, and they ambush predator you, but underwater, it's a different ball game. So you start to realize like, I'm not afraid of that and it's not free, and it's afraid of me. But the great whites, I would say, yeah, totally like get behind a cage and don't like chance it if you can. But what we did was, this was really cool. See what I mean? Like if you put this on a resume, this is a 10-minute conversation and all of a sudden they remember you as opposed to the other candidate. Like, oh, that person swam with sharks. So cool. So I'll tell you a quick story about that. We were in this place called Port Lincoln in Australia. So it's sort of near Adelaide. It's the highest concentration of millionaires in Australia. So if you're ever on Jeopardy and they ask that question, it's Port Lincoln because the tuna business is there, the bluefin tuna. And what they do is they, in the case we didn't do the option where they chum the water and like put like heads of tuna and stuff, and they try to like lure the shark up to get you to like, oh my God, so cool, the teeth. They do, in this case, this was the better option. They do the eco-friendly version, which is, well, what's that? They realized in Guadalupe Island out of like Mexico, California area, Pacific, they realized that sharks, great whites in particular, are attracted to sound. And if you crinkle a plastic bottle, for instance, that sounds like an injured fish. The frequencies, the frequencies that kind of go underwater, they think it's an injured fish. They're like, "Ooh, okay, I'm curious. I want to see what this is like." So in true to form for Australia, they're like, "Oh," they realize that the same frequency of a crackling plastic bottle is also the same frequency as heavy metal music. And so what they did was they started like putting floating speakers on the surface of the water. And we get in the cage and they start playing like AC/DC because AC/DC is Australian. So you're listening underwater, you're freezing, it's so cold. You have this heavy wetsuit. You're sort of like snoobing because they're just giving you like the air from the boat. And you're trying to like kind of stay afloat in the cage. You're holding on and you're listening to like Hell's Bells and like Thunderstruck. It's like the best. And then like Metallica, like Ozzy Osbourne. You're like, this is amazing. Why we're here to see great white sharks. Yeah. So like, to me, that's not a scary scenario at all. That's amazing. And then they're out on the surface trying to hit the water with pool noodles to like create some splashing. So the sharks are now like looking around going, what's going on? This is kind of interesting. I'm curious. And they're ambush predators. So great whites, they want to eat the seals. And so usually seals are very kind of nimble and ambidextrous. So they float on the surface, they put their head down and they look around with their big eyes because that's their way to defending themselves. When the seal doesn't see a shark, that's when it's easy target. So what sharks do, great whites in particular, they come from the depths and they come up and they hit them and they bite them. So seals naturally look down. So when a shark sees the eye, it goes like this, it goes away. And the way that the shark is with their coloring, the gray on top and the white on the bottom, in the murky water, you don't see the shark. I literally did not see a great white shark when I was in the cage listening to AC/DC. You only see it when it's close, and it's little pointed. It's called pointers. They're called white pointers in Australia. So it's a little pointy nose. It's a gape mouth with teeth and a little black beady eyes. And you're like, oh man, there's a great white right there. And the minute I made eye contact with it, it went like this. It flew away. It kind of curved away into the abyss again. And that's exactly what it was. However, the sharks were not aggressive. They weren't aggressive because they weren't being lured with like bait up top and like chumming in the water. They were very chill. So it was an awesome experience because here I am like watching a shark. I literally scared the shark by looking at it. I'm listening to AC/DC. I'm looking at great whites. I'm like, this is so cool. And yeah, so of course, like I would encourage people to do it.
That's an awesome story. So Sarah, I'd love to kind of get into my signature question, which is the question I'm going to ask every guest. What is the definition of happiness and what is the definition of your life's purpose? And so I'm curious, if somebody were to ask you to define happiness and to define your purpose, how would you do so?
I would think as simple as possible. Happiness is a feeling. It's a feeling and it's simple and it's free and it's something that, right now I'm happy. Right now you're happy. That's it. Easy. Happy. It's a feeling. It's something that gives you joy. It raises your vibration. It's like elevating. It's light. It feels light. It feels like confident. It's okay. I'm in this moment and this moment's good. I feel good. So that to me is happiness. In terms of purpose, I don't like to answer that question because I don't think we know. Some of us don't know what our purpose is, and that's okay. You don't have to know. You figure it out. You just kind of flow with it and see what calls you. I don't know what my purpose is. I might go to a psychic on TikTok and spend money to find out what the higher spirits are going to tell me my purpose is, to be honest. I don't know. I just am doing what I feel called to do, what feels good. There's a guy named Bashar, again, back to spirituality. Like there's this guy named Bashar who channels an alien. It's really interesting, actually. And, he says such interesting things, like whether or not you believe it's a shtick or phony or baloney, whatever. What he says is still really good. It's still really valuable, his takeaways of how he sees the world. And he just keeps saying, follow your highest passion to the extent you could take it no further. That's it. There's no sort of guardrails on it. There's no sort of like, it has to be this way or else. He's saying that when you magnetize, you're a magnet when you're happy. We talked about this earlier. You're a beacon. You shine, you radiate. So when you do something that makes you happy, naturally, give it time to unfold and trust the process that things are going to work out for you in a way you didn't anticipate that may, be a job that was so cool, And so like, I don't know, it's like my books, right? I don't know if I'm going to make $1 on these books. I hope everyone buy my book when it comes out. But I'm doing it because it makes me happy. I just feel happy. I'm focused on it. It's a cool story. It's interesting. It may open doors I didn't expect. But it's my excitement. I'm following my excitement. And I got to trust that something is going to yield in a way that I didn't anticipate. So that's then eventually you look back and say, oh, maybe that was my purpose, right? What is it, Soren Kierkegaard, that life is lived forward and understood backwards. So I think that's why I don't want to answer the question what purpose is, because it's like you almost have to know what your purpose is so you could live it forward. Okay. But you're allowed to change your mind. You know, you can reinvent all day long. You don't have to be a firefighter for the rest of your life. You know, my purpose is to save people. Okay, you could save people as a firefighter, and then you go ahead and save people other ways. I don't know. You know, it can evolve and unfold the way kind of you feel called. Again, feeling it out.
I love that answer, honestly. And it's something that's, a little bit unique. And I like how you described it as a feeling. And I also liked how you mentioned like the radiant, or like you feel light. I think people don't realize like when they do certain things, like that they're giving off that energy, but they might not actually truly realize it because they're enjoying it so much and just focus on enjoying it. But like other people can like see and feel that energy for sure.
Oh yeah. Yesterday I was in a bad mood on a Zoom call, and you could just feel like I was such a doldrum. You wouldn't believe it from today, but yesterday I was just like, I don't believe anything's going to work. I'm so sad. Everything sucks. Like I felt that way yesterday. Literally, legitimately felt that way yesterday. And you're right. Like you could totally know, like feel like, ew, get away from me. Like who invited her to a party? So yeah, so that proves the point, right? It proves the point. But again, you don't have to be happy for other people. You have to be happy for you. That's all that matters.
All right, Sara, that wraps up this episode today. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate it. Where can listeners go to find more about you?
Emboldenadventures.com. You can go on my YouTube channel, Embolden Adventures. You can hear some of my speeches, some of my, stories I've shown, social media. That's where you can find me. You can subscribe to my newsletter, and my book's coming out in 2025. So it's in editing mode now. I'm really excited about it. Can't wait.
Awesome. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to DM me on any socials for any feedback. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I'm very grateful and appreciate it. Thank you, Sara, for joining me here today.
Thank you, Eric, for having me.